Max here. There has been so much talk lately on the value of the dollar, inflation, why are gas prices so high? Is hyperinflation on the rise? Is it coming to us? Well, I did my best to go through about 6 or 7 articles to show you a basket of opinions. But the reality is this: fuel is up $1 in this last year. I just bought corn. It was 27 cents an ear at the beginning of 2021. Now it's a few months later. It costs almost $75 per ear. So there's definitely some inflation, but is it hyperinflation? Let's find out. All right, so first article here is from The Atlantic, just talking about the differences between the Weimar Republic, which was where Hitler ended up taking charge, and the hyperinflation. It's pretty much an article that says how we can never become Weimar with hyperinflation. I thought it was interesting. Give a little history of that. Here's what I find really funny. Zimbabwe was the most recent extreme hyperinflation. Look at that. It's a $500 million note. Nice. So everyone's a 100 millionaire in Zimbabwe, which means absolutely nothing. But here's a couple of things here that I thought was interesting. So why the U.S. can never become the hyperinflation breeding grounds is, one, we don't have any problem selling our debt. Yes, as of right now, that is true. Right now, this moment in 2021. However, we've printed $3 trillion this year so far. And when you print more dollars, the value goes down. So I'm not too sure how long that's going to last. I hope it lasts forever. I'm definitely fighting for our good old US of A, but I don't know. Second is, we aren't actually printing money. It just means the Fed is putting more money on their balance sheet, which is such a convoluted and complicated thing. It's definitely not a good thing, though. Then the third one was interesting. The U.S. is a highly productive economy that is nothing like bombed out Budapest. Agreed. We're definitely not, war-torn country right now. That's for sure. Right now, at least. We have political violence and craziness happening, but we're definitely not war from other countries. The fact of the matter is this, though. Highly productive, that's where I start drawing lines. Right now, we have so many people on the government dole, and is that going to change anytime soon? I don't know. It seems as though that some states, as of right now, this is recorded in just about June of 2021, some states are withdrawing all these unemployment funds because right now, there's not a labor shortage. There is a shortage of people willing to go back to work for a wage that's about what they're making on unemployment. We've incentivized the unemployment, so how are we going to get that back to normal? Anyway, I disagree right now with that we are a highly productive economy because as of right now, we are very unproductive. Okay, last article, I promise. What if we're measuring inflation all wrong? And this is from Forbes. What's really interesting, I like this survey they had. Percent of respondents by age to question, how concerned are you right now about inflation in the U.S.? Younger folks, 52% were very concerned. Old people who are in my age bracket, 50%. Middle-aged, 48%, and 55 plus, 37%. So this is really strong. Almost 50% of anybody adult to age 54 is really concerned about inflation. I thought that was really interesting because that shows you that inflation is not a term that people are ignorant to. They know what's going on. They may not know the CPI index or what the percentage of inflation is at any given time, but they can see it in the gas prices. They can see it in the food prices. They can see it in the lumber. There's a variety of things, and those are just three things right there, but there's a ton of things going on. So anyway, there are many signs inflation is already here. Commodity prices are up, home prices are up, energy prices are up, shipping rates are way up, used cars and trucks are through the roof. I was talking to a guy recently who has a used car dealership, and he was saying that some of the cars on his lot that he's had since last year have appreciated 30-40%. Appreciated. Yeah, I said appreciate on a used car dealership. That's mind-blowing. That's so beyond anything that I can even imagine, to be completely honest with you. And obviously, inflation is really simply put, there's too many dollars chasing too few of goods. That's what's going on. We've put how much money into the economy over the last couple of years? Thanks to stimmy checks and unprecedented money printing, real disposable income is set to have its biggest increase ever in any given 6-quarter period. The firm expects U.S. consumption to surge an extreme 10% this year, triggering a significant jump in new orders and new hiring, all of which is highly inflationary. This month, in fact, U.S. manufacturers reported the sharpest rise in new orders since 2014, according to IHS Markit. So that just means that there is a ton of free money, stimulus money that people did not earn. There's a ton of new money, but not any production for it. It was just printed and given. So there's going to be, obviously, if the demand is, as the demand raises, that's how it works. Prices will continue to high. People really want it, the prices are going to go high. People don't want it, the prices go down. As more people want something, the price goes higher. It's simple economics. Next article is from CNBC, written in 2019. The last article was written in 2021, so more recent. But Fed analysis warns of economic ruin when governments print money to pay debt. That sounds really similar. Well, we've definitely printed plenty of money, that is for sure. But it seems as though the inflation that the government is showing us is only about 2%. It just jumped to 4%, which take it for what you will. But anyway, this is a really, really simple concept here. A solution some countries with high levels of unsustainable debt, that's definitely us, have tried is printing money. In this scenario, the government borrows money by issuing bonds and then orders the central bank to buy those bonds by creating or printing money. Scotty Wool, Caitlin Furking. History has taught us, however, that this type of policy leads to extremely high rates of inflation, hyperinflation, and often ends in economic ruin. Well, if we've seen the past, Zimbabwe, Weimar Republic, we've seen every single time that we take the precious metal content out of the money and make it a fiat currency, which is pretty much just a piece of paper that means nothing, besides the two parties transacting in it. Once we start doing that, we're in trouble. Once we start down that path, there's no turning back, because the reality is, right now our debt is in U.S. dollars. The problem with other countries where they can't do this is because their debt is also in U.S. dollars. So if we take any other country, they can't print their own domestic currency to pay off in U.S. dollars. That's simply not how it works. If they do that, the value of their own currency goes down. So right now the U.S. has kind of like a landlock, I guess, monopoly on world trade because of that. But the reality is, every time you start printing money without economic output, there's a reason to print money is when there's a ton of economic output, ton of producing, then you can print money at a small rate, 1% a year. Right now, since 2019, we've printed 33% of all the dollars that were ever created. So we've added literally trillions of dollars into the economy. What does that do? Well, over the long term, that's not good, because printing money brings the value down of the dollar. The value down of the dollar means things will not be as they are right now. Because if a cup of coffee right now goes from $2 a cup to $20 a cup, which is 1,000% inflation, what do? I don't know. Next article from Forbes, written about 3 years ago. Are Russia and China trying to kill the dollar? And this is quoting Russian Foreign Prime Minister Sergei Lavrov. And here is his picture right here for a visual. Anyhow, there's a couple things here. This is right when the sanctions were being put on Iran, because Trump was being very tough on them. So this probably has some political undertones to it, so I can only take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, Lavrov visiting Turkey and told a press conference, unilateral enforcement measures are illegitimate in international affairs, a reference to the American sanctions. One way to counter these illegitimate barriers and restrictions is we can use national currencies on our bilateral trade. Yeah, but here's the thing. Is someone going to take the ruble for oil? No. Right now, all oil transactions are done 90% US dollar. Only 10% of those are done with local currencies. I don't know if a lot of other countries are going to trust a currency like the ruble to follow through and actually have value at the end of the transaction. I strongly believe that abuse of the role the US dollar plays as an international currency will eventually result in its role being undermined. Yeah, that could be the case. That very much could be the case. However, I'm not too sure that that's going to happen anytime soon. No one really knows what the future holds, obviously. But the reality is, as of right now, that's what we got. 90% of oil transactions are done in US dollars, and that's the whole entire world. I understand that Russia and China want to go away from that, but that's just reality right now. And then lastly, while Lavrov might be right that the use of national currencies goes only so far, here's what I was just saying. Will traders in China, for example, be content taking Turkish lira in payment for goods shipped when they know that the currency will be worth much less by the time the ship reaches its destination. Yeah, these other countries' currencies just simply don't have the depth the U.S. dollar does. Again, that's today. And I'm not saying that's going to change either way. I'm not sure, obviously. I don't have a crystal ball quite yet. It could go either way. I just know the $3 trillion we've printed in the last 2 years, that's a lot of money. And we can only take so much before the dollar begins to inflate. Next article from CNBC, a growing club of very powerful countries is steering away from using the dollar. This was about 2.5 years ago or so. So things may have changed a little bit, but let's see. This is the interesting clip I wanted to play.
What I do know is that the current situation is unsustainable. You have a growing club of countries, of very powerful countries, and the major movers are China, Russia, the European Union, that have a strong motivation and a stated motivation to de-dollarize. And part of the reason is the use of extraterritorial jurisdiction by the U.S. You're subject to U.S. jurisdiction if you use the dollar. Okay, if you clear through a U.S. bank, if you use the dollar, you are not an American person, you're not working for an American company, you're not doing business with an American company, you have nothing to do with the U.S., you've never set foot in the U.S., you're still subject to U.S. jurisdiction. So there's a very, very strong motivation for a lot of countries to move away from the dollar. So
see, they go further and talk about how oil is really tied up right now. But the reality is there's this growing club of countries. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind and definitely to keep an eye on. But the reality is, as of right now, the dollar, again, 90% of oil transactions, and the world is run by petroleum. That's just a fact. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Although there's these rosy goals of my country, at least, of having, all this green energy by 2030, 2040, 2050. Good luck. It's just not going to happen. Oil is oil, and the developing world really needs oil. You think someone in Africa wants a solar panel when they can't eat? I mean, when you're doing hand-to-mouth situation, you don't care about the environment. The reality is oil is very, very important. It's very, very necessary for life as we know it. It's interesting to see here that there are multiple countries who want to go away from the U.S. dollar because they don't want to be bullied. I mean, bully is a tough word because is keeping our interests, the U.S. interests in line, really bullying? Is wanting to put sanctions on Iran, for instance, who is a complete exporter of terror? Is that a good thing or bad thing? That's where your conscience has to come in and think, is the U.S. doing this for good intentions or bad intentions? And you will obviously hear a variety of opinions there. But the reality is inflation may go up because these countries don't want to use the dollar quite as much. But the reality is this. China owns a ton, and I mean a ton of our debt. So they would be taking their economy and ours. It's a suicide mission if they attempt to sell off all their debt they have. So it goes both ways. Who knows what's going to actually play out in the future? And the last thing here is the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which pretty much shows inflation according to our Bureau of Labor Statistics. They show that inflation as of right now is about 4%. It was 2% last month, which was March. April is the most recent one I have today, and it's about 4%. But what if the reality is we're not actually measuring it how it should be? So Shadow Stats, which provides alternative inflation data based on the pre-1980 and pre-1990 methodologies. So if you use those methodologies, as it says right there, inflation right now using the old school way is actually more like 9%. That's what you see right here. As opposed to what the official inflation, just over 4%. So that's almost a doubling right there. If we use the 1980 version, inflation right now is more like in the 11-12%. But let's just use the 1990 version. So the reality is our government says inflation just a few months ago was less than 2%. But in reality, if we use the old way of measuring it, it was actually more like 4.5%, 5%. So there could be some really, really scandalous accounting principles that are going right now in the government. I don't really know. But the reality is if you use any other way that the government does not say, obviously, they've updated their methodologies for the 21st century. I don't know about that. So it's really interesting to see, though. Inflation might actually be more so 8%, and if you looked at this graph, you said, which way does it seem to be going? Well, it seems like it's only going one way currently. So is inflation on its way? Inflation is definitely here. Hyperinflation, I'm not really too sure. The time will tell, obviously. What do you guys think, though? Is hyperinflation on the rise? Are we going to see huge inflation over the next year or so? I don't know yet. I know we've definitely seen some pretty significant inflation, pretty significant. All these prices have gone up. I mean, the housing market right now is literally on fire. There is so little inventory. But we'll see. We shall see. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will catch you guys in the next one. And make sure to buy something that hedges you against the inflation.